All right, Shalawam. My name is Lamad from the GMS. The End is near 2K in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I want to give all praises to Yahawashi, SHAM, Yahawashi. Double honors to the elders of Great Millstone. Shalawam to all the sincere AHCHYAM, labor and true sincerity, keeping their garments. Today, basically, I have an article I found, which is, pertinent to showing, the times that we're living in now. But I'll read the scripture, break it down, and then I'll go to it real quick. This is Daniel 8:25, and this, of course, this is talking about, Antiochus Epiphanes, but those were the Greeks, and this article is dealing with the Roman Empire. But it's like they were both Edomites, and they both, Esau has the same spirit today as he had back then. So it says, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but shall be broken without hand. All right, so it says, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. So it's talking about how, basically, this article is going into how, let me see, it says, the title of the article, it says, Jesus was born in a police state, and that's basically what the name. Jesus is not the correct name. The correct name is Yahawashi. Jesus in the Greek is Isus, and it means basically it's supposed to be going back to the Hamashiach, the anointed one, or saves, but we call him Yahawashi in the Hebrew, which means deliver or saves. All right, because there's no J's in the Hebrew alphabet, so that couldn't be his name. So anyway, all right, so this picture right here, right, it kind of shows you the similarity. Like on the left side, that's the Roman legion, and on the right side that's the militarized police of today. And they do the same thing. They had the same, like the centurions back then. They had the shields. The riot police today, they had the shields. They had their swords. The riot police or whatever, they had their guns, their high power rifles, all that stuff. Anyway, so it says the Roman Empire, a police state in its own right, had ordered that a census be conducted. It says Joseph and his pregnant wife Mary traveled to the little town of Bethlehem so that they could be counted. There being no room for the couple at any of the inns, they stayed in a stable where Mary gave birth to a baby boy, Jesus. All right, so that, I mean, everybody pretty much knows this story, even if you aren't, this isn't something very super deep in the scriptures and all that stuff. This story, what it's talking about. But the thing is, the Roman Empire was a police state. They was going to different countries, colonizing the people, putting them under their authority and all that stuff, the same way America does. So going on, it says, unfortunately, Jesus was born in I'm gonna just read it verbatim. Jesus was born in a police state, not unlike the growing menace of the American police state. And when he grew up, Jesus did not shy away from speaking truth to power. Indeed, his teachings undermined the political and religious establishment of his day. And that's something that our people don't really take into consideration. I kind of just thought about that just now, but Yahawashi, if he was, most of the churches, the so-called churches in this day, they have a 501c3 charter, which makes them, down with the government or whatever. But the the true men of the Lord, or the true spirit of Yahawashi, Yahawashi, you're not gonna be, making covenants with the government and all that type of stuff. It's because it says right here, it said, and when he grew up, Jesus did not shy away from speaking truth to power. Indeed, his teachings undermined the political and religious establishment of his day. It says he was eventually crucified as a warning to others not to challenge the powers that be. And that's true because you got a lot of people just say like for a case in point, like my family members, they know what I'm into, but I don't be trying to preach to them or nothing like that. But they made my mother, for example, she claims to be Christian or whatever, but it's like she knows my beliefs. I guess you would call it maybe militant or something, but they know that I mean, you could go into the scriptures. I can back up everything that I'm saying, the spirit I'm in and all that, but it's like they don't accept that. They don't want to go against the grain or whatever, and that's not the spirit of Yahawashi Yahawashi. That's not the spirit that Yahawashi was in when he like walked the earth over 2,000 years ago. So it says, yet what if instead of being born into the Roman police state, Jesus had been born and raised in the American police state? So it's asking a rhetorical question there. Rather than traveling to Bethlehem for a census, Jesus' parents would be mailed a 24-page American Community Survey, a mandatory government questionnaire documenting their habits, household inhabitants, work schedule. So and that was an example. Like back then, you had to come so the Romans could count you. And now, you have to fill out like censuses and all that stuff. You know what I mean? It'll be people uh that'll come door to door, asking, trying to, all your information. Instead of being born in a manger, Jesus might have been born at home rather than wise men and shepherds bringing gifts. However, the baby's parents might have been forced to ward off visits from state social workers intended on prosecuting them for the home birth. And I mean, I don't really know too much about this, but I mean, I'm sure it's probably true, you know what I mean? Because they make it like, back in the day, because back in the day, like for example, my mother told me stories about how her great grandmother was a midwife and all this. So she used to be, she said that they were basically like Gadites or whatever. And in Georgia, in what city was it? Twiggs County, I think Georgia, Macon, Georgia, or something like that. They, she was a midwife, and so back then they used to deliver the babies at home. They knew the whole science and everything, how to do all that. You know what I mean? They were well versed in that. But nowadays, they want you to bring your child to the hospital, just like how if you want to homeschool your kid, it's like they try and set up all types of laws or whatever to try and prohibit you from doing that, because they want to indoctrinate your child just as much as they want to inject them with certain things when they're babies and all that stuff. So I don't really know too much about the home birth thing, but I could see that being the truth. One couple in Washington had all three of their children removed after social services social services objected to the two youngest being birthed in an unassisted home delivery. Yeah, so that's an example. Had Jesus' parents been undocumented immigrants, they and the newborn baby might have been shuffled to a profit-driven private prison for illegals. And that's basically what's taking place right now. Is you have the tribe of Issachar, and probably not only them, but they're just the main ones they talk about. But they're doing this immigrant thing or whatever, trying to say that they're immigrants. So they could lock them up. Who knows what they do, for real, for real. But they basically lock them up. They have prisons for them, all that. And these prisons, they're, of course, there's not no secret. They're privately owned or whatever prisons. It says where they would have been turned into cheap forced laborers for corporations such as Starbucks, Microsoft, Walmart, and Victoria's Secret. 'Cause I think those are companies that are known to have the privately owned prisons. The workers basically build their products or whatever, build up their company. It says from the time he was old enough to attend school, it said, Jesus, I'm just reading verbatim. Jesus would have been drilled in lessons of compliance and obedience to government authorities while learning little about his own rights. So they would have been just like when they go to school, for example, the Gadites, they would be, they sent them to the boarding schools where they would take away their children, take away the Gadites' children, send them to boarding schools, cut off their hair, make them wear the so-called European or Edomite clothes. They couldn't speak their language. They couldn't, they just tried to assimilate them into their society. And the same way they tried to do the so-called Negroes and Latinos, where they would send them to the public schools and make it like mandatory that they go to the public schools, or try and glorify it. You know what I mean? Let me see. All right, so it says, had he dared to step out of line while in school, he might have found himself tasered or beaten by a school resource officer, or at the very least suspended under a school zero tolerance policy that punishes minor infractions as harshly as more serious offenses. Had Jesus disappeared for a few hours, let alone days, as a 12-year-old, his parents would have been handcuffed, arrested, and jailed for parental neglect. And as the scriptures say, basically, when you're 12 years old, or when you go through puberty, you're a man. So, but according to the society, you got to wait until you're like 18 to be officially considered as an adult. So these are the grievous laws that they have, out right now. For the moment, Jesus made contact with an extremist such as John the Baptist. He would have been flagged for surveillance because of his association with a prominent activist, peaceful or otherwise. Since 9/11, the FBI has actively carried out surveillance and intelligence gathering operations on a broad range of activist groups. And of course, the Hebrew Israelites are under there. When you look at the Project Megiddo. When you look at the Project Megiddo, you would see that Israel is basically, the Israelites, especially the ones that go out and teach, are part of the that group of people that are being spied on, so to speak. It said Jesus' anti-government views would certainly have resulted in him being labeled a domestic terrorist. Extremist. Law enforcement agencies are being trained to recognize signs of anti-government extremism during interactions with potential extremists who share a belief in the approaching collapse of government and the economy. And that's what we basically teach. That's what Yahawashi taught. So it says, while traveling from community to community, Jesus might have been reported to the government officials as suspicious under the Department of Homeland Security see something, say something program. And that's basically like people snitching on people. And the scriptures say, let the right hand, don't let the left slack you. Don't let the right, it's like, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. So, you're not supposed to go around, basically snitching on people, especially if they're, doing the right thing. So it says rather than being permitted to live as an, rather being permitted to live as a itinerant preacher, Jesus might have found himself threatened with arrest or daring to live off the grid or sleeping outside. In fact, the number of cities that have resorted to criminalizing homelessness by enacting bans on camping, sleeping in vehicles, loitering, and begging in public has doubled. Yeah, and I did a video about that, begging in public. He got laws against that. they got laws against, say for example, the Gadites, they did a ritual or gathering where they would put up teepees or whatever, and they banned that. They said they had to get permits and all that. And it says sleeping in vehicles, like it's crazy. Viewed by the government as a dissident and potential threat to its power, Jesus might have had government spies planted among his followers to monitor his activities, report on his movements, and entrap him into breaking the law, such as Judases today called informants. Often receive hefty paychecks from the government for their treachery. You know, you got that amongst the camps. You got people that are like spies or informants. It said had Jesus used the internet to spread his radical messages of peace and love, he might have found his his blog posts infiltrated by government spies attempting to undermine his integrity, discredit him, or plant the incriminating information online about him. And that's pretty much, you know, what happens to the Israelites. Is you got scoffers, you got people like the dude. This the first thing that comes to my mind is the dude Avenger, Yahawashi. Because it says attempting to undermine his integrity, discredit him, or plant incriminating information online about him. And you know he did that. He did it to Zion from the DTA camp. You know, they continue to do that stuff about only apostles. I'm talking about this dude Yahawashi. It says at the very least he would have had his website hacked and his emails monitored. It said that Jesus attempted to feed large crowds of people. He would have been threatened with arrest for violating various ordinances prohibiting the distribution of food without a permit. Florida officials arrested a 90-year-old man for feeding the homeless on a public beach. And you know, the scriptures say, you know, you're supposed to help, you know, roughly paraphrasing. There's a bunch of scriptures. I did a video on this too. But you know, you're supposed to help, you know, somebody that asks you or needs your help, an Israelite especially. Jesus spoke publicly about his 40 days in the desert and his conversation with the devil. He might have been labeled mentally ill and detained in a psych ward with no access to family or friends. Because that's what they'll do. They'll 302 you, which means they basically would force you to, you know, go into the hospital. I mean, they had the power to do that. Without a doubt, had Jesus attempted to overturn tablets in the Jewish temple and rage against the materialism of religious institutions, he would have been charged with a hate crime. Currently, 45 states and the federal government have hate crime laws on the books. Rather than having armed guards capture Jesus in a public place, government officials would have ordered that a SWAT team carry out a raid on Jesus and his followers, complete with flashbang grenades and military equipment. There are upwards of 80,000 such SWAT team raids carried out every year. God damn. Had anyone reported Jesus to the police as being potentially dangerous, he might have found himself confronted and killed by police officers for whom any perceived act of non-compliance, a twitch, a question, a frown, can result in them shooting first and asking questions later. And you know, you got that happening on to endless amount of Jakes or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like yesterday I was actually pulled over by the police because they said I had a tail light out, and I remember my father was with me. He's telling the guy that was we were doing work or whatever, some HVAC work or whatever, and he was telling the dude like don't make any sudden movements, and that's kind of the spirit that Jake's in, because it's like, you know, they could just shoot you for any reason or whatever. So like before they even got out the car, I had my, you know, I took out my license, my registration, had everything in my hand, like up front, visible or whatever, because, you know, it was a woman that walked up too, you know what I mean? Because they're just itching to, you know, straight up shoot Jake or whatever. So anyway, getting back to this, charged with treason and labeled a domestic and then the thing was, you know, she wasn't she told me she's not gonna give me a ticket, but I know that they were just running my information to see if I had warrants or whatever. They just seen three, you know, so-called black men in a truck or whatever. They were just you know, checking out everything. You know what I mean? The license, the registration, the insurance, the emission stickers. Cause matter of fact, I got the emissions because it's an older model car, and you know, it's hard. It's kind of harder and more expensive to get the inspections. I have a '91 Chevy Silverado, so it's harder to get those. So they were checking. A lot of times, people might get like the fake stickers or whatever. So she was checking all that stuff. Anyway, make a long story. I mean, getting back to the point. It said, charged with treason and labeled a domestic terrorist, Jesus might have been sentenced to a lifetime in a private prison where he would have been forced to provide slave labor for corporations or put to death by way of electric chair or lethal mixture of drugs. Yeah, and then like you have now, you have the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, where they could detain you if they suspect you of being a terrorist and detain you indefinitely without trial or anything like that. Either way, as I show in my book, or this is going back to what the author said. Hold up. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. But I mean that those are some pretty good points of how, you know, the times that we're living in, you know, they haven't changed basically. These are you know, like the scriptures say, there's nothing new under the sun. You know, you had the Roman Empire back then, and now you have you know, like we always say, we're in the last leg of the Roman Empire. So you had the militarized police. You know what I mean? So, you know, I hope these comparisons, you know, were edifying. So yeah, all praise to Yahawah Shem Shai, double line to elders, apostles, great millstone. Shalom to all the sincere AHCHYAM. Shalom.